understand this work as an attempt to make, Egypt legible, to your. A lot has been said and written about the description of Egypt. This is the institute. It was a collaborative work of over 160 civilian scholars who accompanied Napoleon's expedition, and the eventual, first 20 volumes that were produced took about 20 years to make, and involved something like 2,000 artists, etc. The only thing I'll mention about this now is that, in a sense, like Edward Said has mentioned in Orientalism, that the work also, in a way, serves to primarily displace the actuality of Egyptian history. So the next year. 1871. In 1869, the Royal Opera House is erected by the Khedive of Egypt, Ismail Pasha, and in 1871, he invites Verdi to produce an opera for which he pays him something like 150,000 francs. And the Aida is an opera that opened in Egypt on like the 24th of December in 1871, and received a lot of acclaim. I won't get into the narrative or the synopsis of the story, but it does involve one of the main characters. The main character Aida is an Ethiopian princess who has been captured and is working as a slave in Egypt. The screenplay was written by a man named Auguste Mariette, and he was working with Ismail Pasha, and a lot of his sketches actually drew on the description of Egypt. So 1952, this I'll be very brief, is the Great Cairo Fire. About something like, it's a response to attacks by the British in Ismailia, and as a result of which about 750 buildings owned or associated with Europeans, including 40 movie theaters, are set alight. And the perpetrators of this Great Cairo fire were never identified, which up until this day, remains like an unsolved mystery. 1971 is when the Royal Opera House, on the 100th anniversary of Aida, burst to the ground as well. Once again, there is actually a film that came out last year, and so it's taken that long to even look back at why and how this might have happened. And it was quite I think, emotional catastrophe for the cultural landscape, because for 20 years it took 20 years for the next opera house to be built. There are a lot of details around this as well, but 2008, and this is the summer we're talking about. So the Shura Council, which is the upper house of Parliament, and at this moment when the Shura Council, followed by the National Theatre, burned down, all the news is able to know is that there was an electrical short circuit. There were often no one in the building. A few people were there but managed to get out because the House of Parliament was closed for holiday. And the fire trucks took very long to arrive. The one that was, the videos are quite crazy because you kind of see the fire on the 3rd floor, and fires usually rise, but because everything is wood, the ground collapses and the fire moves down. And in a way, again, just trying to think of what it meant for this to have happened, and the fact that this is happening at a particular moment in time is also something that we've been, kind of thinking about. At this moment, when these two buildings burned down, the narrative around it is very much around state negligence, right? Even though there's not much information that gets out as to how this happened or why it wasn't stopped, it's kind of this loss of heritage, because again, like the National Theatre was something that, again, was a very prominent space of cultural production, and then again, like I said before, it's the political and the cultural, these two institutions kind of start exploding, exploding or caving in. So, they're bursting at the seams with that release, and perhaps in lieu of something else. In 2011, which is during the protests, on 17 December, we have something of an opposite situation. At this point, the narrative completely switches, and the protesters are accused of, not caring for their history. So, at one moment, you have the negligence of the state, and then, 3 years later, this fire, history is kind of used against in some ways, and it's interesting for us. I mean, in this moment, to also think how conservation or discourses around conservation also have to switch. When the building came down, and a lot, including Egypt's copies of the description of Egypt, were all burned down. There was a lot more that was said in response to this moment, but then there are scholars like someone named Malak Helmy, who's at the American University in Cairo, who also speaks of the fact that in fact this building was already burned down because nobody could actually access it. So these archives they exist, but they may as well have not been there. And now I'll just come to I forget to the last date, which is actually just before we came here. The Muslim Brotherhood banned ballet, and the show of Aida kind of opened with a protest on stage. In a way, the staging of protest, right? We go from when there's a certain impossibility of a certain kind of speech to kind of the excess of that, such that it takes on the stage that is decided. And yeah, so these are the kind of thoughts and things that we're dealing with. It's just the sketches.